What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Odd Shopper channel. Today, we're talking some college basketball. It is March the 5th. The conference tournaments have begun. March Madness on the way. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you by BetMGM. Limited time offer for those of you in legal states, with the exception of New York, Nevada, and Puerto Rico. What you'll do is click the link in the video description below. Make your first deposit of at least $5. Turn that around, $5 wager on any team, total, market, whatever you want. You are getting $150 in the form of bonus bets. And if you're in North Carolina, that's $200. That's money you didn't have. Money you can use on conference tournaments, money you can use on March Madness. And it makes a big deal for your bankroll. Or if you just want to take some extra games, that's another way to do so. The legal age for most is 21. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, couple big games on deck. Weird slate. We've got two marquee matchups. It's Purdue, Illinois, and then we have Florida, Bama. And otherwise, we've got some blowouts, some games that don't really matter heading into conference tournaments. So it's a weird slate of games, but we'll kick things off with one of the premier ones. Purdue taking on Illinois. So this is a game that has been played already this year, except Terrence Shannon was not active for Illinois. Still ended up being pretty close. He had Purdue getting a win, 83-78. That was at Purdue. So now Illinois is at home. And Illinois is the favorite in this game, which is a big surprise to me. Purdue, you can find as an underdog. You're not going to see that maybe the rest of the way. So I'm a bit surprised, especially considering Illinois' defense has been hemorrhaging points, absolutely hemorrhaging points. Opponents have scored at least 80 points in 5 straight games. Maryland scored 80 points. Penn State scored 90. Iowa scored 85. Minnesota scored 97. And Wisconsin scored 83. And Wisconsin plays at about the 350th tempo out of 362 in the country. So Illinois defense is a major concern. And yeah, when you face Zach Edey, that's a huge concern as well. But a couple of the stylistic matchups, I think, that suit Purdue. You obviously have Edey inside. He's a mismatch against every single big in the country, with the exception of maybe Donovan Clingan. But he's certainly a matchup advantage against Coleman Hawkins, and we know he's going to get his. I think really your hope for Illinois is, can you limit him to maybe like 20 to 30 points? And one of the ways to do that is fouls. Unfortunately for Illinois, they don't really have anyone that draws a lot of fouls. Except for Terrence Shannon, they don't play the same position, so this is kind of a non-factor. Hawkins, he's only 3.3 fouls drawn per 40 minutes, so he's not the kind of guy that's going to get Edey in foul trouble. He's also ceding over a half foot in size, which is really problematic considering he's going to play the 5. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about Hawkins having matchup advantages himself. He's a pretty good three-point shooter. He shoots at 40%. He can space the floor, which is a problem against Edey. And yeah, that is the case, but I also think there's a pretty realistic outcome where Coleman Hawkins fouls out of this game in like 20 minutes. And then who are you putting on the floor? Because I can tell you this much, behind Hawkins, if they need to put serious minutes into Dane Danger or anyone behind him, this Illinois team is going to lose by 30. So, I mean, that's a major concern for Illinois, even though Hawkins kind of does match up in a weird way against Edey. And aside from that, if Edey gets in foul trouble, this team's not dead. You look at three-point percentage on the year for Purdue. This team is second in the country at three-point percentage. There's only one team that shoots threes at a better clip than Purdue. One team. Illinois is 194th in three-point defense. Yeah, I mean, Purdue has advantages everywhere, aside from being on the road. And we've seen this Purdue team play some close games. We've seen them take some losses. I mean, teams need to play at their A-plus game to get Purdue out of there. I remember the Northwestern game vividly that went to overtime. People kind of use that as a feather in the cap of Northwestern. They shot 50% from 3, and they still couldn't beat Purdue. They had to get to overtime to even make that game close. So this is just a shocking line to me. Whether you could play this on the moon for all I care. Purdue as an underdog is going to be almost an auto bet for me at any point in time. Next game up, we're going to head to the ACC. Like I said, there's a lot of greasy games. We'll talk Florida and Bama at the end. I don't have an actionable play in that, but we'll give you kind of just a quick touch on it. Before we get there, let's go to the ACC. Georgia Tech takes on Wake Forest. This is a game that is kind of meaningful to Wake Forest, who tries to claw their way back to tournament consideration after some abysmal losses, one to Notre Dame. They're a 13.5-point favorite here. I think that's a little light. This Wake Forest team does everything better than Georgia Tech. Funny enough, the Yellow Jackets are 143rd in both offensive and defense. You rarely see that. But Wake Forest, a team that can really score it. 23rd in offensive efficiency, 48th in defense. Any sort of efficiency provider really loves Wake Forest, which is kind of a shame that they played so poorly this year. For reference, like they grade out awesome in my stuff. They're 21st at KenPom, the 21st best team in the country, Wake Forest. This team might not make the tournament because of some of the egregious L's they've taken. And this weekend was just another example of that after being up on Virginia Tech by double digits and somehow losing by 11 points. It's a streaky team. They do have concerns. Damari Monsanto hasn't been playing. He's their three-point shooter. He had knee soreness. I don't think we see him here. But outside of that, Wake Forest has other players that are elite offensively. And they're going to play at a faster pace than Georgia Tech. That should be a concern if you're a Yellow Jackets fan. Ultimately, Wake Forest is 15th in three-point percentage. They're also solid inside, 52nd there, largely because of Efton Reed. His presence has got them all the way up to 9th in effective height. And I think this edge is very pronounced. Even though you see Georgia Tech ahead on rebounding, a lot of that's just on the offensive end. I have no issues with that. As long as Efton Reed doesn't foul, he's going to have a massive advantage inside. You look at overall effective field goal, Wake Forest is 28th. Georgia Tech is 275th. Georgia Tech flat out just cannot score. They're 283rd in interior scoring, 241st in three-point scoring. And then they're outside the top 100 in interior defense, where Efton Reed is just going to absolutely live and body this Georgia Tech team. Not to mention, Georgia Tech turns the ball over constantly, 215th in turnovers committed. They never generate turnovers. They're 358th. They're only ahead of four other teams in turnovers forced. So you should have a very clean game from Wake Forest here. As long as they don't go on some sort of cold streak, which has happened to them at times, they should get this done pretty easily, in my opinion. All right, next up, we have two atrocious games in the Big East, but just because they're atrocious doesn't mean you can't find some value. Providence takes on Georgetown. We've seen the severe regression from Providence that most of us expected when Bryce Hopkins went down, and now they're a 7.5-point favorite over Georgetown. And I still show some value on Georgetown. I can understand if you want to just pass on this one. It is Georgetown, and anytime you might consider putting your hard-earned money on Georgetown, maybe you should reevaluate. But to dive into this, Georgetown's actually ahead of Providence in offensive efficiency, which is going to surprise many. It surprised me today. But Providence essentially has two players, Josh Oduro and Devin Carter. If those two players aren't scoring, this team is not scoring. And it's been pretty bleak of late for Providence. Their most recent games, you had a loss to Nova by 11 points, got absolutely demolished by Marquette, had a 4-point win over Xavier, 11-point win over DePaul. Honestly, that should have been wider. And then they beat St. John's by 3. Prior to that, a loss to Butler. So it has not been tough, or it has not been good sledding for this Providence team of late, and they still just don't have any shooters. Their best shooter is Devin Carter at 39% from 3. Other than that, you don't have anybody. And this is it appears in the effective field goal percentage for this team, and you can see it just really across the board in scoring. I think the only thing that sort of gives them life here is Georgetown's horrific on defense. So to me, it's the real question is, can you run away from Georgetown? And I'm not sure you can. This Hoyas team can actually shoot pretty decently. They're 147th in three-point percentage. That's over 50 spots higher than what Providence shoots from 3. Both teams shoot a ton of threes. There's no real size advantages either direction. Georgetown actually a little taller, 132nd to Providence is 179. So the rebounding numbers, they're not very drastic, and you actually have a vastly better rebounding team on the offensive end in Georgetown, 46th overall there. Providence, 254th. So yeah, it's a lot of points. There's a volatile game, so I can understand not wanting to take it. I show enough value where I'm going to take Georgetown at the 7.5, make this closer to 5 with the recent play Providence has put on the floor. All right, so we'll double down on the greasy Big East games. We have St. John's taking on DePaul. This one will point to an under rather than the spread. It's ballooned to 19 points in some spots. I don't think you can lay 19 points with St. John's, but I think you can go under 152. Pacing isn't great in this game. St. John's certainly plays faster, 84th to 164. But you basically have all of the offensive efficiency problems on the DePaul side, not to mention they're facing a St. John's team that plays solid defense overall at 23rd. there basically isn't a single offensive advantage for DePaul when you break it down. They're not the tallest team. They don't rebound well. They're constantly changing their rotation. They don't play fast. They're in a tough matchup here on defense. You're going to be hard-pressed to see this DePaul team score maybe 60 points in games like this. So right away, can St. John's do it on their own? And I don't really believe that they can. When you look at this DePaul team, they're finally healthier. And take that for what you will, but you have Chico Carter back. That's important at the guard position. Not that any of these guys are really elite defenders, but he was out for about a half month there, 2 weeks. He's back in the fold now. And they've been somewhat better on defense. They've allowed under 82 points in 2 of their last 3 games, which I think is important because they're not scoring more than 60 points very often themselves. And pace for these teams is actually slowed of late. So there's not really too much analysis. If this goes over, it has to come entirely from the St. John's side. And I have my questions with this overall offense, especially when you start diving in just quickly. St. John's 228th in effective field goal, 205th on the interior, 227 from 3. They do a lot of their work just by rebounding really bad shots. They're 6th in offensive rebounding, but we've talked about this as a double-edged sword often. Would you rather just make your shots right away, or would you rather rely on needing 3 things to go your way? 1, you miss the shot. 2, you get the second chance opportunity. And 3, you get the putback without fouling. I'd take it the first way, just making your shots initially, which St. John's is not capable of doing. We'll take it under at 152.5 here. All right, now we're getting really in the weeds. The Horizon League tournament kicks off tonight, and we have some real weird matchups. IUPUI faces Cleveland State in the opener. The Horizon League does play their first round at home venue, so Cleveland State has a home game before I believe they go to Indianapolis for the second round and finish this out. But 15.5 points, this is too light. This should be closer to 17, 18. Shop it, find the best number. I would have no interest if you end up finding something closer to 18. OddsShopper will help you do this. The link is below. You can sort by your state. You can sort by your books if you only play on a couple. Highly customizable. And we have all sorts of tools to help you. We take a market-based approach. It shows you plus EV spots across sports, not just college basketball. There's NHL, NBA player props if that is your flavor. And it's all included in one package. The Discord is involved. That's where I am. All of the workers here at OddsShopper, we use these tools, put them in the Discord, and give you the analysis. It's all available, $14.95 for a week, $49.95 for a month. There are no long-term commitments. I find it useful, and I think you will too. So check it out. All right, IUPUI is arguably the worst team in the country. Somehow they have 6 wins, a lot of them against like D2 teams. I believe they did beat IPFW at one point, but they most recently lost to teams like Detroit Mercy. And IUPUI is outside the top 350 in almost every single efficiency metric. They're 319th in rebounding. Unfortunately for them, they're still going to be at a disadvantage when you compare this to Cleveland State, who's 204th in effective height, about 70 spots better, and still about 60 spots better on the glass. Not to mention the offensive glass, where Cleveland State is 33rd, IUPUI is 137th. Neither of these teams shoot well, but Cleveland State's at least 239th, where IUPUI is 330th. That's a vast difference here. And really, this all comes down to the atrocious defensive metrics for IUPUI. 362nd in interior defense. That's dead last in the country. Dead last. This team is 355th in three-point defense. You're talking bottom 10. This team also 362nd in three-point rate and 362nd in three-point percentage. That actually makes sense. You're the worst three-point shooting team in the country. Maybe you shouldn't take a lot of them. And they don't. But this team just flat out cannot shoot. Slightly better inside. Cleveland State, again, playing the taller lineup. That's not going to be the easiest place for IUPUI to score. It's just flat out mispriced given these two teams. And now we're in the Horizon League tournament. Everything matters in these spots. Couple more. Loyola, Maryland takes on Navy. This is another one where I think we have a similar situation, but too many points. Loyola, Maryland, you might see their record 7-24. Yeah, it's not great. But the efficiency metrics for these two teams don't differ all that much. They're both fully healthy for the most part. And you see Navy with slight advantages. They're at home. They're 318th in offense, Loyola 340th. Defense is actually, there's only a 5-spot difference, 323 to 328. And then Loyola Maryland has some pretty stark advantages, particularly inside. This team has the edge in rebounding, 148 to 251. They're way taller. Loyola Maryland is 57th in effective height. Navy's 359th. They play the third smallest lineup in all of college basketball. And they rely on doing a lot of their work on the offensive glass. When you look at effective field goal percentage, Loyola Maryland is actually the better shooting team by a wide margin. It's 282 to 355. So the slight edge in offensive efficiency for Navy comes on the glass. And Loyola Maryland is an awesome defensive rebounding team. They're 62nd. They do not allow a lot of second chance opportunities, which is a big problem against Navy. The one massive advantage Navy kind of has is they force a ton of turnovers, 27th in turnovers forced. Loyola Maryland 339th in turnovers committed. That's a big concern for me, but still a lot of points when you have such a very clear advantage on the inside with Loyola Maryland and a team that's lost a lot of close games that, that Navy has ended up winning in similar spots. So we'll take Loyola Maryland with the points, 7.5 in this spot. And last one we'll talk about today, another premier game, one I haven't taken, one I don't show a lot of value on. Alabama, Florida. This is moved to Florida -2. The total is absurd, 175. That is reflected in the tempo. We have two top 30 tempos, and we have two top 15 offensive efficiencies, and two teams outside the top 65 on defense. So we should see points galore. I show value Alabama's direction. The real hesitation I have personally is Latrell Wrightsell's being, I think, reevaluated for a concussion, it sounds like. So he's had the concussion. He's been returning to practice. And then there was a report that came out that said he's been having trouble practicing without concussion symptoms afterwards, headaches primarily. So he will be reevaluated. I don't think we see him. And that's important against this team because Wrightsell shoots 45% from threes, the best on the team. You still have Sears at 43%, but no one else that shoots threes all that regularly is above 40%. Sam Walters, I suppose, at 41, but his sample is smaller. So you have some volatility there. Is a big loss. Wrightsell had been playing more minutes as this team had gotten it through conference play towards where we are now. And Florida does have advantages. This team, I think, should be able to absolutely body Alabama inside, who doesn't have any sort of front court. They play a tall lineup. They're 8th in effective height. Florida's 3rd. But the players are just wildly inefficient for Bama on this area of the court. You're getting almost nothing out of these players. Grant Nelson's continues to foul repeatedly. Nick Pringle, Sam Walters, Muhammad Wagi, Jaron Stevenson, these players don't do anything on the floor. So you're getting nothing in the front court. You're relying on these up transfer guards, spraying threes, and you don't have the best three-point shooter on your team. Whereas Florida gets pretty good minutes out of their front court, and they're deep. So if for whatever reason you get in foul trouble, Tyrese Samuel or someone can't stay on the floor, you still have Condon. You still have Henlocked in at 7-1. Thomas Haw plays like 12 to 14 minutes a game. He's not good, but he gives you another body that's 6'9". I think there's a vast disadvantage Bama will be playing with in the front court for this team. So that's the biggest thing here. There's advantages both directions. Florida, they don't defend the three all that well, 96th in three-point defense. Bama's 20th in three-point percentage, 10th in three-point rate. That's their main advantage. But then Florida on the inside. Just don't see any way Bama's front court can hang with some of the forwards for Florida. Not to mention, Florida's not the worst shooting team either. They do cede some effective field goal percentage, but everything else, I think, is pretty even for these two teams. So we'll wait. If this got to like 3 or something, I would probably play Bama. Or maybe one thing you could do is just wait. If Latrell Wrightsell is active, which I don't think is likely, but if it does happen, you could play this late in the day. That'll do it for us today. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Questions, reach out to me on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. We'll be back all through basically every day through the tournament now. Until next time, good luck. We'll see you later.